Charter schools will take dollars out of our public schools.
Kids and families need some new alternatives.
Coming up on City Inside Out, Initiative 1240. Voters will soon decide for the fourth time whether to allow charter schools into our state.
Right now we're studying Project Food Cards.
We head to Portland to see firsthand how a charter school compares to a traditional one.
Really what we're doing is adding to our district.
And our studio panel debates whether charters are making the grade.
There's one more school model that we need in our state.
The results are not there.
Should voters support Initiative 1240? And are charter schools the right kind of education reform for Washington?
It makes students excited about learning.
The data shows that it's not successful.
Our elections coverage continues.
Go!
Next on City Inside Out. Welcome to City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. This fall, for the fourth time, voters will decide if charter schools should be allowed in our state with Initiative 1240. Supporters of 1240 say our school system needs help, and with 41 states now allowing charters, Washington is falling behind in education innovation. But opponents say I-1240 is at best a risky idea that takes money away from other public schools at a time when education funding in our state is in turmoil.
We're going to stop right now. You don't need your pencil anymore.
Emerson Elementary, a K-5 public charter school in Portland, doesn't seem that different from most schools. But then you hear the 5 words from 7-year-old Samantha Blacker that could bring tears to a parent's eye.
I love math. It's fun.
School administrator Tara O'Neill says Emerson, with only 144 students, is a model our state could learn from.
I think that charter schools are part of the solution.
Ready? Go!
Voters have rejected charters 3 times in Washington, in 1996, 2000, and 2004. Charters have been in Oregon since 1999, giving parents a choice.
1, 2, 3, eyes on me!
Teachers develop the discipline measures and the curriculum at charters like Emerson, such as this morning movement exercise session.
And we're going to walk. Let's start with walking all together.
But it's not all fun and games. Emerson, like other charters, still has to meet state standards.
A slow jog.
And on that front, this school has earned an outstanding rating, with more than 95% of 4th graders meeting or exceeding math and reading benchmarks.
Yeah, because our school's pretty awesome, right?
O'Neill says this school's autonomy allows it to experiment, to find out what works and what doesn't, unlike traditional public schools.
What happens to a neighborhood school that's not working? It stays open and it keeps not working, and they just keep not working harder. And a charter school can be closed down. That's the big difference.
The problem is too many charters don't make the grade, says I-1240 opponent and Seattle School Board member Sharon Peasley.
There is no reason to vote in favor of charter schools.
Peasley points to a 2009 report from Stanford that shows nationwide only 17% of charter schools are doing better than traditional public schools. 37% are doing worse.
The data shows that it's not successful. Twice as many charter schools fail as succeed. Okay, so it's a 2-to-1 failure rate. That's not a good recommendation for charter schools.
Kevin Washington, with the Yes on I-1240 campaign, interprets the Stanford Study a different way.
We can take advantage of the learnings from that and avoid some of the pitfalls.
Washington says many communities of color are getting a boost in the 41 states in the U.S. where charter schools are allowed.
Kids and families need some new alternatives.
And the $4.6 million the Yes campaign has raised from the likes of Bill Gates and the Bezos family may be telling. Washington says our schools aren't generating the students that businesses like Microsoft or Amazon want.
Can they hire from this pool of kids? And the answer to that question is no. So we need to fix that. We need to fix that in a hurry.
The anti-1240 campaign says what really needs fixing is the way we pay for public education.
Our Washington schools are underfunded.
Kathleen Smith, with No on I-1240, points out our state Supreme Court ruled earlier this year the legislature has failed to meet its constitutional duty to fully pay for K-12 education.
The schools do not have the resources they need to make the children succeed. Charter schools will take dollars out of our public schools.
And when it comes to dollars, the state teachers union is providing more than half the funding so far for the No campaign. Labor leaders say charters are a move to privatize our schools.
It's the wrong way to address the challenges in public education.
Some friends like to run around a lot.
Another labor concern, charters often hire non-union teachers.
Thank you so much.
John Russell was in the Oregon State Teachers Union for 5 years before coming to Emerson for the last 10. He's getting paid about 80% of union scale, but he says for the creative freedom, it's worth it.
My quality of life in my workplace is invaluable, and I won't go back.
Thank you very much.
Yet opponents say if 1240 passes, the bell will toll for traditional public schools in our state.
Charter schools destroy school communities.
Steve Nesich is the parent of a third grader at Loyal Heights Elementary in Seattle. He says charters not only take money away from other public schools, but also pull away talented students, teachers, and families, an unhealthy approach for a public education system trying to grow.
It doesn't work that way. You have to tend the soil, then all of the plants have an opportunity to thrive.
All right, ready? Move away from the dragons.
What choice will help our schools and our children thrive? That's the pop quiz you're up against with I-1240 on the ballot. And joining us to talk about Initiative 1240, we have Shannon Campion in support of I-1240. She's the Executive Director of Stanford Children. Thank you for being with us. And also opposing I-1240, Melissa Westbrook, longtime education activist. Thank you both for joining us on this show here. We talked about this before the show, and Shannon, we decided we would start with you. I want to start with this question of why we need charters. Our state already has some public schools that are innovation schools, as we know, 24 of them around the area. In fact, a new K-5 STEM school in West Seattle just opened in my neighborhood this fall. Why not encourage what the current public school system is doing? Why do we need charters?
So first of all, charter schools are public schools. That's a really important point to get across to your viewers. And public charter schools have certain flexibilities for teachers and principals in their schools that allow them to extend the school day or the school year if they want, to develop their own curriculum and budget, and to really meet the academic needs of their students. These are public charter schools that are working well in 41 other states. They are an option that you see families and students take advantage of in 41 other states. And we crafted Initiative 1240 to have very high accountability and strict oversight to ensure that we have some of the best charter schools in the country. And the Stanford Study that's often talked about shows that makes two important points. One, the states with the strongest laws have the best public charter schools, and charter schools are doing a great job at serving at-risk, struggling students.
I want to talk more about the Stanford Study in just a minute, but let me get to that basic question to you, Melissa. Why not charter schools? We heard a little bit about what Shannon was saying. We've seen double the amount of charter schools in our country since we last voted on this in 2004. 41 states have charters, 6,000 of these schools around the country. Supporters say it's time to get on board. We're falling behind when it comes from the kind of innovation that charters might be able to bring.
Well, first of all, the voters of Washington State have been asked this question and said no 3 times. I think that speaks to the veracity of what Washington State voters do as voters, which are to think about the issues and make decisions on their own. 41 states, and yet there's not one district in the entire country that can say because of the presence of charters they've closed the achievement gap. The results are not there. Just because other states are doing it doesn't mean that it is working. And as well, we underfund our existing schools. The Washington State Supreme Court says that. You bring on, so you will thin the pot of money going to those already struggling schools that have already had their budgets cut by the state legislature, and then you bring on more underfunded schools. It simply does not make sense. And the initiative itself is not well written. It is vague, and it doesn't do what it purports to do, namely serve at-risk children.
Okay, we're going to talk about that one more time once again, but let's move to that money issue, Shannon, because I think it's a very important one. You've heard this argument here, and it was just made by Melissa. Charter schools, put them in the mix. Why do we do that when we're not adequately funding the public schools that we have right now, according to the Washington State Supreme Court?
Charter schools are public schools.
Okay.
So it's not accurate to say that this is going to take money away from public schools, because these are public schools serving public school students. The state found that the way the money flows for public charter schools is the same as it flows today for traditional public schools and for other school models we have, like innovation schools and alternative schools. And I've heard opponents say in debates that they agree that the money follows the child and that's okay. So are we trying to pick and choose here when it's okay for the money to follow the child and when it's not? Because that does not change with public charter schools. The money still follows the child.
Okay, let's talk about this money to the child piece.
And explain that. Of course the money follows the children, but we're not talking about following the child from an existing school to an existing school. We're talking about expanding the number of schools. That thins the pot of education dollars that are available. And you want to spend education dollars on things that work. Charters are an unproven system that does not overall work. The issue is also that the amount of money does not go straight into the classroom. It pays for services at the school. So when you lose children from a school, you lose money for librarian services, for counselors, for nurses, and so then, yes, the existing school could lose students and lose services.
Let me ask you on this one, though. When you come to the money part of it, I think you heard it in the setup piece there. When a traditional public school doesn't work, it stays open and continues to struggle. The charter model, you would think, makes up a lot more sense, or it makes more sense. When it's not working, it gets shut down.
Well, let me give you two things. First of all, I was on the Closure and Consolidation Committee for the Seattle schools, and I can tell you there's nothing harder than closing a school.
Sure.
Being able to open and close schools like Jack in the Boxes is not really a good idea. People are very tied to their schools. It's a difficult thing to do. Number two, the accountability is not so built in. There's a lot of may do this and may do that for authorizers in this initiative. It does not require them to shut down a low-performing charter without giving them option after option to save themselves.
Okay, all right. I want to get back to that oversight piece in a little bit, but I know that we mentioned the Stanford study earlier, and Shannon, you brought this up. Let's break this down. A study from a few years ago, 3 years ago, says 17% of our nation's charters are doing better than their traditional school counterparts. 37% are doing worse. Doesn't seem like a good track record. I think you have a different interpretation, though.
So what matters here is the way we wrote Initiative 1240. So we looked at the best state laws, and we looked at a national model law for public charter schools, and crafted 1240 off of those high-performing state laws, and tailored it to meet the needs of Washington students. So it's apples and oranges to look at just a slice of the Stanford study. You've got to look at the rest of the 51-page study, which says that the states with the strongest state laws will have the best performing public charter schools, and that those charter schools are cracking the code for poor kids and kids in urban settings and kids of color. And those are many of the students that we want to serve here with Initiative 1240. So it's a disingenuous read of the Stanford study to not highlight those other two aspects, because other groups have given this initiative an A in terms of how strong of a state law it will be. It will be arguably the best, one of the best, if not the best, state law in the nation.
Okay, so potentially learning from the mistakes.
Absolutely.
What do you
Well,
think
let me
there?
just tell you that template comes from a National Charter School Commission, which has it invested in itself to create more charters. And one of the things they really wanted in this law was no caps, and of course, that was one thing they got dinged for by that commission. And let me just say, that would all be true if the initiative does what it says. But it is not, there's nothing in there that says they absolutely have to serve at-risk kids. There is nothing in there that absolutely says they have to choose the proven groups that have had results. And in fact, if there are more applications approved by authorizers than there are spaces to have charter schools, you would think they would go to a second round and pick the very best ones. They don't. They all go in a lottery.
Let me challenge you on one piece here, though, Melissa. When I'm looking at some of the different monies that the city of Seattle, for example, is throwing into our schools with the family education levy there, over the past 20 years, we have invested more than $254 million there with this idea that will close the gap between white kids, kids of color. As it stands right now, the gap is still more than 50 points in some cases. I'm looking at a lot of money that's spent and not a lot of results there. Doesn't it make more sense to have something on a smaller scale, like a charter, where you can maybe be a little more nimble, make some changes there, things of that nature?
Well, what's happening, though, is the city has gotten smarter on that and is demanding to see results.
Okay.
And a good example of that kind of nimbleness you can see in Tacoma. Tacoma has Lincoln High. They created a small at-risk high school within there called Lincoln Center. They've closed the achievement gap, completely closed the achievement gap for those at-risk kids and increased parent involvement. And they didn't need charters to do it. More and more districts are waking up that, yeah, we can do these things, and we are going to work with our union partners and get this done.
Okay, I want to talk about the oversight piece here, because we've talked about that a few times, and Shannon, I'll start with you. This version of the Charter School Initiative is a little bit different than the ones we've seen before. Among other things, it would allow for 40 schools in 5 years. They'd be run by nonprofits, and a 9-member charter school commission would be put in place to judge the applications from organizations who want to start a charter school, public charter school. I want to talk about this commission piece, just because making sense of it from a layman's perspective here. We have a school board already. Do we need another board, the members of which don't necessarily have to have education experience? What's going on with this board? Help us out.
Yep. So one of the things we learned in looking at other states is that there needs to be more than just one option for a charter school to be authorized. So under Initiative 1240, local school boards can apply to be authorizers, and then they can authorize the charter schools in their district. If they don't want to do that, those schools still need a place to go. So that's why there's the State Charter Commission, and that group can authorize public charter schools in the state. And we have many appointed boards in higher ed and K-12 in the state, so it's a pretty familiar concept. And this board is, of course, accountable to the people who appoint them and ultimately to the voters, since it is elected officials who appoint the board members.
Brian, just let me follow up on that.
Okay.
Actually, the initiative doesn't have them accountable to anybody. They're appointed and they're accountable to absolutely no one. Nope. I can tell you that in Section 208 and 212, it specifically has no wording whatsoever about who would be accountable. They'd be accountable to.
I want to throw an issue, though, at you, Melissa, on this piece, because I talked to a charter school director down in Portland. She said having some group of experts on charters would be very helpful. They don't have one of these in Oregon right now. She said it would be very helpful rather than having to deal with a traditional school board that might not be as familiar with the whole charter school concept. Doesn't that make sense to have that board there as some sort of interlocutor in between what's happening and I guess the overall school board?
Well, it would if the wording in the initiative had it that they had to have some charter school background, but they don't. So that really isn't very helpful. And in fact, just their existence would cost $3 million over the 5 years, which is money that comes out of our scarce education resources and doesn't go into the classroom.
Okay, I want to move on. Or Shannon,
Sure,
do you have a piece on that?
I hear a lot from Melissa and other opponents, and I hear a lot about concerns about kind of the top line. What I don't hear is the bottom line, and that's who I and everybody else who supports Initiative 1240 is here about. The 14,000 kids in our state who drop out every single year. Yeah. What are we doing for those kids today? Do they need to continue to wait to get the education that they deserve and should be a right for them? No, they don't. And public charter schools are proven. They are cracking the code in school districts and cities and states around the country. Why does President Obama support public charter schools? Why does our Education Secretary, Arne Duncan, support them? Why do the mayors in Boston, Newark, Sacramento, Denver? There's a growing waiting list of students across the nation. They are proven, especially for the kids we need to serve. And the initiative does give preference to schools that will serve struggling students. That is very clear in this initiative.
I can answer any and all those.
Okay.
The whole issue is that I can list a whole number of things that we are already doing in the state. If we have time, I'm happy to do that. Okay. Not every elected official you're going to agree with. I don't agree with President Obama. It's interesting, though, our own governor said that she would have vetoed any charter bill. It's interesting that the Washington State Democratic Committee at their weekend meeting in Yakima voted 500-0 against charter schools. It's interesting that our list of endorsers is about 30 different diverse groups, and there's our ed reformers and business interests.
Okay, and I want to talk about the support for both sides here. Shannon, I'll come back to you here. A lot of big money in this race. Paul Allen, Bill Gates, the Bezos family, we've been talking about this a lot. I just want to get to this basic thought of how does that money from big business translate into connecting with your average family, with kids in school?
So I think the people who support this initiative at all levels want to see this option for kids in our state. It's an option that's working in 41 other states. Our supporters at all levels believe that public schools work well for many students, and that for some, our traditional public schools are not working well enough, and we need to have an option for those kids now. 14,000 kids dropping out every single year. We've got to be doing something for these kids, and we know that this can work, especially with the very strict accountability and oversight that we built into Initiative 1240.
Okay, Melissa, I want to talk about the money issue real quick. I know you have some other thoughts here, but this is a big part of it. The Yes campaign has raised close to $4.7 million on this. I know the
and
No
from
group,
out-of-state people, too. It's a wonder.
They're all over the place.
Curious that a Walmart heiress in Arkansas and the head of Netflix in LA is so vastly interested in Washington State.
Money talks, and it's a big gap. I'm just trying to figure out how you make up for that.
Oh, well, the good thing is we've already voted on this 3 times. Washington State voters know what they're looking at.
But the landscape has changed since we last voted
on
this.
And the thing of it is the landscape hasn't changed in terms of performance or accountability for charters. And here's the great thing. The internet is a great equalizer. We have reached out in all directions. The fact that our endorsement list dwarfs theirs means that people are listening, and I'm sure your viewers are going to listen and pass the word around. And of course, we have the Washington State PTA that has come out against it because of the lack of parent involvement and also the lack of local oversight. Those are hundreds of thousands of parents in Washington State. And frankly, I would rather listen to parents.
Okay.
Can I respond
Please.
to that? You know, I feel like this is a little bit, Melissa, like the substitute referee issue in the NFL right now. Your intentions are really good, but you're just getting it all wrong. You're just getting it all wrong.
I think you're wrong myself as well.
We've got to address this. This should be a debate
that's
about the
why
facts.
I have the sections here, and I'm happy to cite
And
every section.
To talk about the accountability as being vague is inaccurate. It's very clear and very strict.
There's many times it says may.
32 criteria.
May is not will or shall.
Charter schools need to address.
We are going to link people to the initiative language on our website. You can check it out for yourself. I do want to talk a little bit of nuts and bolts. Let's go down a different path, though. Let's talk about new charters could be formed under 1240 if it passes, but also schools could be converted into charter schools under the new law. How does that conversion process work? What does it look like?
So if a current public school wants to convert and become a public charter school, they have to go through the same process, meet the 32 criteria, and be approved by either the local school board or the state charter commission. So the exact same process has to be followed. They have to meet all the same criteria regarding academic achievement for their students, their track record of serving the students they want to serve, transportation needs, fiscal responsibility, et cetera. In addition to that, at least 50% of the teachers or the parents need to sign a petition that supports that conversion.
Okay.
So it's an extra piece of accountability and responsibility for the local community to agree with that conversion.
Well, let me just go through that really quickly.
It sounds like democracy in action to some extent, but what's your thought?
Here's the thing. Nowhere in the initiative does it say that if a petition is being circulated, that school community has to be told. You have 18 teachers in an elementary school, 10 of them sign a petition. 10 people upend an entire school community, taking the building away from the district. The district gets no rent. The district has to pay major maintenance. It disrupts enrollment patterns, transportation. And to that transportation point, you know, one of the big issues here is we need to give parents more choice. Sadly, in this initiative, there is no mandate to provide transportation. They can write down a plan, but our plan is we don't have a plan. They can take city buses. You take away choice from poor families when you take away transportation. This trigger initiative is the most dangerous, harsh one in the entire country. The trigger initiative has never been used legally anywhere in this country yet. And there is no other trigger petition that allows teachers and teachers alone to upend an entire school.
Shannon, you had a thought on this.
I mean, you know, you either haven't read the initiative or you're intentionally being disingenuous about this. The words trigger and presumably you mean parent or teacher do not appear in the initiative. Show me where they appear in the initiative together, because they don't actually appear together.
The word trigger doesn't, but we know a trigger. If it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's a duck. It's a trigger.
Hang on. Shannon, please.
What's more local and what's more actual control, local control and accountability than parents choosing the right school for their child and for their child's needs? No student is automatically enrolled into a public charter school. Parents have to make the choice to send their child to that school. I don't know why opponents are so afraid of that level of parental control and involvement in their child's education, because this gives parents a choice and an option.
And that's where the parent choice ends.
Okay.
There is nothing in the initiative that includes parent involvement or engagement.
I will let people read the language of this initiative at home, and I urge you to do it. It's a long one, but it's worth reading. I need to move on to another topic here, Shannon, with you, though, because I know there's been a lot of pushback from teachers' unions on charters, at least in part because the charters don't have to hire union teachers. Teachers could form a union under the public charter school situation, but they don't have to. What statement is this initiative making to our teachers' union, organized labor in our state?
So there are thousands of teachers who, you know, want to be a part of public charter schools across the country. There's actually a public school in Boston where 4,000 teachers have applied to teach in the school, where there are 60 open teaching positions. 4,000 teachers apply and 60 open positions. Many teachers, like the one you had when you went down to Oregon, find the environment in public charter schools to be very enriching and very fulfilling. So I think what this initiative says is this is an option that can work. It's working well for students and families and educators across the country, and it's one more school model that we need in our state.
Melissa, let's talk about this. This
let me just say, we're in the
very
middle of a terrible recession. I'm not surprised there weren't that many people applying for those many jobs as well.
But the No on 1240 campaign is very closely tied to the unions in our state. A lot of money for the campaign has come from the union.
Well, actually, there are two different campaigns. I represent the No on 1240 campaign. Ours is strictly grassroots, parents and community. And let me just say on that union issue, you can form a union. You can only have a union at your charter school. You cannot create a union of charter school teachers. You collective bargaining means bargaining in a big group. But this initiative cuts it down to one school, which makes that ability to bargain not so great.
Are you concerned, though, that teachers in our state would leave the union and join these charters, as they had in Boston and other
teachers
places?
need jobs. We're in a recession right now. It's interesting, too, because a very large number of charter school teachers come from Teach for America, which is a group that provides schools with 5-week trained teachers. Most parents don't want a teacher that's been trained for 5 weeks.
Okay, I know that's a whole nother topic that we could do with Teach for America there, but thank you for bringing that up. I'd like you guys to start wrapping up, if you could, with me right now. I'm going to give you about a minute to make sure we have the last statements here about why voters should say yes on 1240, at least from your perspective, Shannon, please.
Thanks, Brian. So yes, we encourage a yes vote on Initiative 1240 because charter schools are public schools. The money follows the child just like it does in our traditional public schools and all of our other school models. And this is an option that's working very well for many students across the nation. And we believe that parents and families in Washington state deserve to have this option as well. And in Initiative 1240, we feel very confident we will have very strong public charter schools because we modeled it off of the best state charter laws around the country, and we made very careful care to ensure that we have very strict accountability and local control and oversight in this initiative.
A minute, Melissa, if you would.
Well, charters don't work, and that if they were working out in 41 states, we would be hearing about a state that has done great things. We voted on it 3 times. We underfund the schools that we have, and until the Washington State legislature, acting on the Washington State Supreme Court, does fund those schools, we should not be bringing on unproven a system of charter schools that will drain our education dollars away from our existing schools. And I urge your voters to read that initiative, and I'll be happy to put a link to all our citations. Our FAQs at our website, we have 25 of them. They have 5. So we clearly want you to know about it.
Fair enough. You'll see both websites and a lot more information on our website as well. Thank you, ladies, both for being here. And we will be right back.
I'm again sort of taking away from the school system that exists and putting it into any private hand, and whether somebody's a non-profit, you know, that can mean a lot of things.
State mandated requirements for learning aren't a perfect fit for every child or every student. So I do think it's good to have other options.
If I had kids, I wouldn't be putting them in a charter school. They'd be in public school, so I don't think money should be taken from there.
If charter schools can provably provide a good education, it's a good experiment.
We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email, contact@seattlechannel.org, or find us on Facebook and Twitter and give us your feedback. Before we close today, it's time for our weekly CIO poll. How do you plan to vote on I-1240? Do you support charter schools, oppose them, or are you unsure? We want to know what you think. Cast your vote and send us your comments at our website, seattlechannel.org/cityinsideout. While you're there, you can watch our programs online anytime. Coming up next week, more elections coverage as voters make some key decisions this fall. I hope you'll join us next time on City Inside Out.